There was never all that much uncertainty about the Ohio State depth chart heading into training camp. 2 weeks later, there's probably even more clarity about what those Buckeyes are going to look like. So the question for a Wednesday on the podcast daily, what's left? He's Berm. I'm Austin. And it feels like we're getting a pretty clear picture of what these Buckeyes are going to look like. Don't you think, Berm?
So to be clear, this is a What's Left Wednesday?
That's right. Yeah. But I didn't say that. You did.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're probably about 30 hours away, 31 hours away from hearing an answer on the quarterback decision. I would imagine anyway. And that's certainly the big domino to fall, which we expect to get some clarity on Thursday when Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are at the podium at the team room at the WAC. And other than that, again, we had a little bit of a back and forth about it on the Snap Judgments last week, but I don't think Ohio State really needs to name a right guard starter until the pretty much like game week. So other than that, like what's left for Ohio State and the quarterback situation, I don't know that it could be any different or if it's any different than we expected, but everything I've continued to hear is that Devin Brown has played very, very well for Ohio State this fall camp. But the elevation and the raising of the game of Will Howard is what people can't seem to stop talking about. So, when Ryan Day comes out and says things like he has complete command of the playbook, like that is not said on accident by Ryan Day. That is a tell. And so, other than the quarterback spot and the right guard, it seems like this team is primed and ready to be, competing for a national championship.
What have you thought? We've mentioned this several times and done that Snap Judgments at Roosters, everywhere else, like talking about the quarterback battle and how we think that this thing has been resolved. I've been really impressed with Devin Brown's deep throws. I think I've mentioned that every time. And I do have this sense that the situation overall for the strength of the room is very different than a year ago. And I think that is a tribute to Devin Brown, for one. It also, I think, is reflective of the work that Will Howard has done from January till now. Julian Sayin has changed the picture, but Lincoln Kienholz has also clearly elevated his game since he was thrust into the Cotton Bowl. Aaron Noland is doing things that you can tell are certainly better from March and April to right now. Like I wonder if people listen to the way that you and I or Bill have talked about the quarterbacks and be like, well, I think they would have said that the room was going to be fine last year, and look what happened. And I respect that. Like, it's okay to be caution or have some caution or some skepticism going into the year, but it certainly makes me look back at last year and think that this is very different than what we watched in August of a year ago. To me,
well, yeah, there was 3 guys who'd never started a football game before, and one of them was a true freshman who'd been on campus for 2 months in Lincoln Kienholz. So it was Kyle McCord had started 1 game prior to that. So let me be clear. But you're going from a room that had 3 guys, one game started, to 5 guys that are all extremely talented. You have a guy who's won a Big 12 championship. You have players, even Lincoln Kienholz, got a lot of reps. Now, that were they great reps? Of course not, but in the Cotton Bowl. But it's hard not to feel more confident about it. But also, when you look back to a year ago, we were, and I think rightfully so, operating with a little bit of grace just being given to Ryan Day for what he had done at the quarterback position prior to that. So certainly this team, I think I feel way more confident in this room, not just because these players I think are more prepared, but I think the personalities are better suited for what this team is about than they were probably a year ago. And that it's not a knock on Kyle McCord to say that he is maybe not the alpha / super type A type of personality I think you need to succeed at Ohio State in the quarterback room. And guys like CJ Stroud, who are obviously very type A, when he was at Ohio State, CJ was pretty reserved. Justin didn't have to say a lot, but you knew in the weight room and you knew from talking to the other guys around the program, like he was a type A when the cameras weren't around. And so I think that's where I feel the most confidence in the quarterback shift. And specifically with Will Howard, which is why I think that he's really made the separation to be the presumptive starter and maybe announced on Thursday, is that I don't think that he's a guy who's fazed by anything. And that to me is the difference when you have a character like Will Howard, who's been through a lot. He's, like I said, he's won a Big 12 championship game. He's played at Texas. He's played at Oklahoma. He's also been benched. He's also been replaced. Like I think that you have a really unique mental makeup for a room in Devin Brown, who's been passed over multiple times now, if Will Howard ends up being the starter, but still keeps going. You have Julian Sayin, who is a quarterback who is built basically to be a quarterback. His entire life has been just shaping up for him to be a quarterback at a place like Ohio State or Alabama. And you have Lincoln Kienholz, who's finally actually being able to focus on playing football. You got to remember that Lincoln Kienholz, when he got to Ohio State last June, like he had just put his baseball cleats away, and he had, that comes on the heels of putting his basketball shoes away. And like, there was never a time when he was just focusing on playing football. And Aaron Noland, who was a player that broke a number of records in Georgia, playing in the second largest division, winning state championships. Like the depth and the talent of the depth is one thing, but it's just a mental, I think a mental strength in this room that is different than it was a year ago. Because maybe that's on Ryan Day. I think we can all look back and hindsight being 2020 and say that maybe the way that they handled the quarterback room and the discussion and the debate last August didn't actually benefit anybody. And I think that's fair. But when you look at this group, they don't seem to be quite as fazed by it.
Yeah. So if they do wrap that part up, I think as we all expect on the podcast daily this week, then what? I think the only other spots I was going through this and thinking
Then what Wednesday?
Then what Wednesday? Yeah. The only other things that we were really talking about was what was going to shake out at right guard. You've put down your flag. They don't have to make a decision on that, and it's probably too early for them to do that because of the injury anyway. Tight end, where this seems to me like it's trending towards a collective group handling the entire responsibilities rather than just one TE1 in the Cade Stover mold from a year ago. And Will linebacker, I think out of that group, Will linebacker is the only one that seems like there's a pecking order that has emerged. But at the same time, Ohio State says, no, they're neck and neck, Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks, and they're both going to play. And I do think that the second part of that is absolutely true. But it does, like the rest, like right guard and tight end, there isn't that much clarity that I've seen. And I'm not sure that that's going to happen until we get to maybe game week.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it matters. I mean, I don't. I'm going to say this in as direct a way as I can, and maybe it'll sound dismissive, but I don't think it matters one bit if the starting right guard is Tegra Shabola or Carson Hinzman for Ohio State. I think whichever guy wins the job is going to be good. I think that there's actually I wouldn't be surprised if the coaching staff is waiting or wanting Carson Hinzman, who started 12 games a year ago, to emerge so that you have a more veteran group. But if Tegra Shabola is good enough to supplant him, then that's a major positive for Ohio State. So at tight end, I don't know. I think, we're talking about things that have been a detriment in the past. Like I was just talking about where the quarterback room was handled. The fact that no other tight ends were really available or willing or capable of helping Cade Stover in the last 2 years was a major problem for Ohio State. So if you have three guys who can play this year, and I'm going to count Patrick Gerd as that third, with the hope that Jelani Thurman emerges as that fourth, while Bennett Christian figures out exactly what his role is going to be, because I think he's got a future for this team because of his size and his ability as a blocker, et cetera. But like Jelani Thurman is the wild card there for sure. Like if he gets it, if he turns on the other side of his brain, like the athletic side here is obvious, but like, does he want that? Is that what he really wants? Then that room conversation changes considerably. And at Will, the simple reality is, yes, I believe CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles are both going to play a lot, but I do think you can say that without also saying, but they're two very different players and they're going to be asked to do very different things. So I don't think you're going to have CJ Hicks out there in a situation where you're asking him to do the same things that Sonny Styles is asked to do. But I think they will play a lot. Complementary styles are going to be good, because when you put CJ Hicks out there, it's like, go get the quarterback. Sonny, I think, is proving to be a more versatile, more complete player at that spot. So like there's a role for both, but I think that there is a pecking order, which is when it comes down to, we need a stop on 3rd and 3. it's going to be Sonny Styles. And I don't have any real hesitation in saying that.
I did really appreciate the perspective of CJ Hicks. You mentioned this way back in the spring, Berm, that was like Sonny and CJ seemed kind of agitated by the notion that they were having to compete head to head, because I think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong about this. I think that CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles understand that they do different things well. And CJ was talking about this last week, that he doesn't feel like he has to start to have an impact or to potentially lead Ohio State in sacks. The way he put it was that going first doesn't matter to him because he knows that they're both going to eat. I think we would like some of those opportunities for CJ to be more prevalent and maybe in a different way than just lining up at will linebacker, but we aren't the coaches. We make that point a lot. That is not our decision. It's also not CJ Hicks's decision. So the way that he's talking about this publicly, when we know for sure that he has dealt with periods of frustration over his snap count and opportunities over the last couple of years, I thought I came away like encouraged and impressed by the way that he's viewing this right now, because there probably wasn't a world where he signed with Ohio State thinking that in year 3 he was going to have to be, quote unquote, competing with Sonny Styles to play will linebacker next to Cody Simon.
Well, no, and plus, I mean, Sonny wasn't in his recruiting class when CJ committed, and Sonny reclassified and all that is. But when you think about the ability that CJ has, what he does the best, we always get sort of starry-eyed thinking about him in that jack position, whatever it is, where he's working full-time as a linebacker. So like the reality, Mitchell Melton fits that role very well for Ohio State because he is experienced and polished as a pass rusher, and he is able to do that from a defensive end position, where CJ Hicks, we haven't seen him do that. Now we have seen him blitz like crazy from the linebacker spot and be extremely effective in doing so. I mean, the spring practice, the student appreciation day practice that they had back in April, I think will be one of those moments where people are like, wow, just let the guy do that, because he was incredible that day. But yeah, listening to CJ talk last week, he kept saying like he felt like his old self, like the confidence that he had is back. So whatever they're doing right now, whether it's sharing reps, whether it's rotating in, whether it's specific to situations, whatever it is, CJ seems, and talking to him, it seems like he is way more at peace with this current arrangement. And that is a major change, I think, from 6 months ago, where it seemed like there was some contentiousness about, why do I even need to be competing here? I should just be the next man up. And that's not how college football works at Ohio State.
Yeah, it does turn that, if we viewed some of the uncertainty at linebacker as a potential cause for concern for what could be the number 1 defense in the country and a historic defense, like having CJ Hicks embracing a role alongside Sonny, alongside Cody Simon, having Gabe Powers and Arvell Reese elevate the way they appear to be in training camp, like that turns that from a question mark into an exclamation point. And I kind of feel the same way about the guard situation. Once you put Carson Hinsman back out there, like we spent a lot of the offseason saying, well, what's going to happen at right guard? And that's going to dictate the success of this offensive line for Ohio State. That's true, but suddenly when you have Carson Hinsman being able to play both center and guard, when Luke Montgomery could potentially play both center and guard, someone that we almost don't really even talk about that much in training camp, because it doesn't seem like he's in serious consideration for a starting job right now. The depth of that, especially on the interior, has changed in a way, like the conversation should have been very different, I guess. And at tackle, that's where it's like, well, then what happens if Josh Simmons and Josh Fryer, knock on wood, something happens to them? Like, I think maybe we viewed the entire situation or I did maybe viewed the entire conversation about the offensive line wrong in the offseason. Like they had more options on the interior all along. And while the 2 starters are solidified at left and right tackle, maybe it's a weird thing to always be worried about what happens if you have to go to the bench, but that's where there's more, I think, uncertainty for me than anything to worry about when they name a starting right guard.
Yeah, and that's also one of the reasons why I think, and this is not based on conversation I've had with anybody, but just how I'm viewing it. I think that there's value in Carson Hinsman winning that job at right guard, because then you have Tegra Shabola, who's your backup at right guard and left guard, but also your backup tackle if something happens. because he is one of those guys that can kick outside. Luke Montgomery can kick outside. The tackle depth, I mean, if we're talking about what's left Wednesday, the real issue for this Ohio State team is depth at a few key places. Like, who is your backup left tackle? Who is your backup right tackle? Who is your backup middle linebacker? Who is your backup safety behind Lathan Ransom? Like, those are the questions I really want to try to still get answers about. But versatility and the depth and the talent on the interior offensive line is not a concern. We're not even mentioning your guys like Austin Sareveld, who Ohio State absolutely loves as a guy who can play any one of those interior three spots. Luke Montgomery taking reps at center this month. They're now thinking about him long term. Like, can he be the next center? He's a guy who can play all five spots. When there's a lot of discussion about Justin Fry as a recruiter, and I know that people want to have the prototypical left tackles, the Paris Johnsons, the David Sanderses of the world. But one thing Ohio State has done in the last handful of years is recruit 6'5", 310-pound offensive linemen who can play any spot on the line. We've seen that with Josh Fryer, who's played everywhere for Ohio State. Luke Montgomery is in that mold. We now see that with Tegra Shabola. Like, there's an opportunity for guys to make things happen. But for Ohio State, like, the question is Zen Mahalski ever going to be good enough to play at Ohio State? Is George Fitzpatrick continuing to take steps forward? Because I thought he played pretty well in spare moments last year, and there's been some confidence about him emerging. But where's the rest of the tackle depth? And you know, we've seen the Armstrong twins looking a lot better than we anticipated heading into their first fall camp, but they're certainly not going to be counted on this year. Gabe Van Sickle's not going to be counted on this year. But where's the depth at tackle? That's like, if I was sounding the alarms on one position, you know, heading into fall camp, it was worrying about the depth at linebacker. I feel totally fine about that now. Depth at the tackle is major concern. And like, I don't know how you fix it now, but I sure hope that Billy Homer and whatever guys are in charge of looking at the transfer portal and projecting who might be available are doing some work there, because you know, I'm not talking about this year, obviously, unless something happens, but there's a major concern there.
I do think that it's worth pointing out how wild it is that we already knew that Ohio State was talented. Clearly, we already knew they were a national title contender. That's obvious. But the fact that you get into the middle of camp and like virtually every other program in the country is like, yeah, really head-to-head position battles, and we need 2 scrimmages to evaluate, and we're gonna try and make some decisions. Maybe we'll carry these things into the season. Like, Ohio State doesn't have any of that. This is a pretty rare opportunity that we don't have to sit here and cover and stress about multiple different positions. Like, we're talking about depth behind 2 of the best safeties in the country, or depth behind the best nickel, in my opinion, in the country, in Jordan Hancock, and like, who's going to play that role, or the 2025 tackle situation, or knock on wood, a emergency plan if they have to move somebody around or test their depth on the offensive line. Like, this is not normal, and I want to make that point. Like, this is a rare opportunity.
Oh, without question, and that's what adds so much pressure to this season. That's what adds so much hype to this season, and the expectations of this season is that you don't have a lot of the questions other teams do. You return, 13 players from a year ago that could have gone off to the NFL, or 9 different guys that could have been drafted. All of those questions are supposed to be eliminated in this circumstance for Ohio State. If that's why people are like, well, if you don't win now, can you ever win? And I don't know that that's the right way to look at things or not. But certainly when we view this season just from a 10,000 foot view, like, there aren't questions that they really have to worry about. Yes, can Will Howard become, and I've said this before, but if you give Kyle McCord a 6.5 out of 10 a year ago as his grade, what does Will Howard have to be to win a national championship for Ohio State? 7.25, 7? Like,
I mean, if Kyle McCord was a 7 for one more snap, they probably would have won a national championship.
Right. So like, this is a matter of degrees for Ohio State in every single area right now. This is like fraction of a point in what makes the difference between winning a national championship or having what will go down as like one of the more disappointing seasons in history if they don't win one. Like which is again totally unfair to have that conversation in August, but like that is the way it's going to be couched and the way it's going to be viewed. So you certainly have to love the fact that if you're Ryan Day and the Ohio State coaches that you don't have these other distractions right now. But the way people are going to talk about it if things go haywire is going to be absolutely fantastic to watch from an outside looking in.
Well, we'll hear from Ryan Day and the rest of that coordinator brain trust from Ohio State on Thursday as training camp rolls along. So we'll get set for that with the podcast daily tomorrow with some questions we have for them. Maybe there'll be some new stuff for us to break down and talk about as some of these position battles and scrimmage evaluations come in from Ohio State. Not sure yet if we will see any of that practice. Getting kind of late in the week to be surprised by that, but we can cross our fingers and hold our breath and hope that that does happen. No matter what, we'll be back here tomorrow with some podcast daily and some snap judgments as we hear and await word on what's going on with the Ohio State roster. This, though, has been a What's Next Wednesday. Berm called that one. That wasn't me. I don't know where he got the idea for it, but it was fun to talk about it and see what's going on with the Buckeyes with him. That's Berm. I'm Austin. We'll be back again tomorrow. See ya.